are you guys doing? Are you excited for Cate Blanchett? That's how I like it. Welcome to the first sold-out event of the Santa Barbara Film Festival. My goodness. It's very important for me to thank our presenting sponsor, the Manitou Fund, Nora and Michael Hurley. We couldn't do what we do without the love and care of the Manitou Fund. Thank you so much. And to the board of directors of the Film Festival, thanks for all their support as well. Cate Blanchett has been honored at the Film Festival for, this will be the third time. And I told Cate that she's welcome to come every time she damn wants to be here. With somebody of the talent of hers, we will be seeing her more and more of her. She has protean powers. It's unbelievable. And those who have seen Tar, it is one of the greatest performances in film history, written, directed by Todd Field, who I think is an amazing talent unto himself, and he's here this evening. So without further ado, I want to introduce Scott Feinberg, who will be moderating the evening. I just love this man. He's the executive editor of awards coverage at the Hollywood Reporter and the host of its Award Chatter podcast. Please give a warm Santa Barbara welcome to Scott Feinberg.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, first of all, Roger, for having me back to Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and thank you to him and his incredible team, Sean Pratt, Mike McGee, all the board members and sponsors and volunteers for making this one of the highlights of every year for all of us movie lovers. I have been here every year since 2009, including during lockdown when we recorded our tribute from a hotel room and streamed it to you guys. So, you know, if that's not proof that I'll come every year, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'm especially thrilled and honored to be here tonight because we get to celebrate one of the most remarkable actresses of our or any time. She is a woman who is being feted tonight with the Outstanding Performer of the Year Award for 2022 for her performance in Tar, having already won Best Actress accolades for this performance from the New York, LA, and London Film Critics, National Society of Film Critics, and Critics' Choice Association, making her the only person who has ever won all 5 of those, and she's done it twice. But as we'll be reminded tonight, she could have received this Performer of the Year award in virtually any of the 26 years in which she's been on the big screen, and has garnered along the way 8 acting Oscar nominations, 2 of which have resulted in Oscars, and a 3rd of which might next month. Absolutely. Now, having interviewed Cate a few times over the years, I know that she tends to minimize individual accomplishments like those that I've just cited. So I'm going to cite a statistic that shows just how much of a team player she is as well. With the Best Picture Oscar nomination that was bestowed last month upon Tar, the all-time record for any actress already held by Cate for most films starred in that have been nominated for the Best Picture Oscar increased from 9 to 10. Nobody ever, no woman ever has had more. And again, I think it's not a coincidence that she's been at the center of that many standout films. She clearly and visibly makes everyone around her and the film she's in better. And I know Todd Field is in agreement about that. But don't take my word for any of this. I'm going to read a few other quotes here that I think are relevant. The New York Times once asserted about Cate, quote, like Meryl Streep, the actress she most resembles, she is a natural chameleon, close quote. Meryl Streep herself described Cate as, quote, an actress that is not only gifted and talented, but is above all a brave actress. I really admire her enormously, close quote. Russell Crowe called her the most spectacular creature that ever walked the planet. Leah Volman called her the best actor of her generation. Donald Sutherland went with the best actor in the world. Brad Pitt called her mesmerizing, exquisite, and otherworldly. George Clooney emphasized that she is the best actor working today, not actress, actor. And the late Time magazine critic Richard Corliss once wrote, quote, years from now, when cinephiles are asked to name the movie's golden age, they'll say it was when Cate Blanchett was in them, close quote. Let's take a moment now to look at a montage lovingly assembled by Mike McGee of just a little of the work of Cate the Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest thing to come out of Australia since koala bears, the outstanding performer of the year, Cate Blanchett.
I was hoping I was going to sit on the other side, because this is a little revealing.
Oh, well, we can trade if you
Anyway,
want.
we'll see how we go. I'm not wearing knickers.
We are so honored and thrilled that you're back here. Thank you for coming. And I want to begin by just going back to the very beginning, if we can. Can you share for anyone who may not know where you were born and raised and what your folks did for a living?
I was born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. Oh, hello. Australia is dark tonight. And my mother was a teacher, and my father was in the US Navy, and he had decided to be a Unitarian minister, and he went to the Antarctic to find God, and the ship broke down, and he found my mother.
Hey.
And so
Thank goodness.
here I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as a kid, acting, you have said in the past, was just sort of a form of childcare, I guess, right? You were put into kind of Saturday classes.
What, the closet under the stairs?
But even when you went off to university, this was not the path you were necessarily going on. I read museum curator was at one point the goal. So how do you go from that outlook to then going off to drama school?
Yeah, I studied fine arts and economics, and I didn't ever think that acting was something that you could do beyond a hobby. I didn't have any examples in my grandfather was an artist, he was a painter, but he was also a mechanic. It wasn't something that you earned a living from. And, after my father passed away, it was just, you had to be financially secure. So
This was when you were very young.
Yeah,
He was very young.
Yeah, he was 40 when he died, yeah. So, I didn't ever think about it at all. And the student union was very active, so I did a lot of plays, directed a lot of plays, was in a lot of plays. And then someone who didn't particularly like me suggested I auditioned for drama school, which was in another state. So I took the advice and I left.
Now, this is the National Institute of Dramatic Art.
That's right, yeah.
Which has produced quite a few tremendous actors right over the years. When you were there was somebody named Lindy Davis, right, as your third year?
Yes.
You've said that her approach, I don't know if it's still something that you use today when you act, but that it really made a big impression on you at the time. Why was that?
Yes, I think it was quite an eclectic drama school. We tried lots of different techniques, and technique is useful for problem solving, but if things are flowing, you don't think about your technique. It's like you don't think about your homework. You do all your homework, but no one wants to see that. But she was very much about the text and freeing your body in space. So she, instead of holding a script when you were in a rehearsal room, because I trained to work in the theatre, because the Australian film industry punches above its weight internationally, but it's a very small industry, and I was never that girl. I didn't think I'd ever work in the film industry, so I was just happy working in the theatre. And so you'd be in a rehearsal room, and all of the text would be projected on the walls so that you were free to move. And she introduced this really interesting concept to me very early. I found it interesting, that to make somebody else's words your own is a really, really complicated neuro-linguistic process. We think it's easy, but to actually own that language and choose those words and know why and what you want, what are you trying to communicate beneath the words, is a very complicated thing to do. So she felt that that had to be inside your body. And, you know, if I had my way over, I would have worked with Martha Graham or been a Butoh dancer, or, I feel, most free in a way when I'm on stage. And that was what was so great about doing Tar, was that it had that sort of performance component in it. So I felt like it was a homecoming.
Totally. After graduating from, do you guys call it NIDA or something?
NIDA.
After graduating from there, you did something that I guess in a weird way might have been a secret weapon going out into the professional world. You were a reader for a casting director.
I think it's a nice way of saying I was an unemployed actor. Which is actually what I was. But one of the biggest casting directors had seen my shocking audition they didn't know what to do with me. I don't think I knew what to do with myself, really. And so I chose some piece that just didn't. You have to learn how to audition. It took me a long time to do that, to learn how to be seen in a way. And so she saw something in me and would call me in 2 or 3 times a week, and I would read opposite actors who were auditioning. And it was just even if I never took acting any further, from an anthropological point of view, it was fascinating to watch someone walk in the door and going, just turn around and go out because you've already lost the job. It was fascinating. And then I realized also that you can't take it personally, because I was so invisible to the people who were casting. I was just the reader. I would hear them speak about actors, and in a way, they were looking for someone taller, shorter, of a different ethnicity or whatever, whatever their sort of idea of what was right for the role, and had very little to do with that actor's skill often.
And so when you then are going and auditioning after that, you can kind of let go a little more, maybe?
Kind of. That was the
idea, right?
But those rooms can feel a bit airless. And I think if you can get through an audition, you can definitely do the job.
Once you started working, though, I know...
This is a deep dive.
Oh, yeah, no, we got no rush. I don't know about you.
Do you want me to lie down?
Once you started working on the stage in Sydney, it was pretty well received, right? I mean, first person to win Best Actress and Best Newcomer at their equivalent of the Tonys. You were really impressing people, and I think it was, as you say, screen acting doesn't sound like it was on the agenda list, but it sort of indirectly came about because of the theater work, right?
Yes, actually, a casting director who was working a lot with Working Title at the time had seen me play Nina in a production of The Seagull, and for some reason thought I should play Queen Elizabeth. I like that in a casting director.
Right.
It's a very, very... Eric Cantona, the famous football player, also played the Duke of Anjou. So it was a very kind of eclectic cast. But yes, so that it came out of... and Shekhar Kapoor, who directed it, said that he'd seen Gillian Armstrong had cast me as really fought for an Australian to play this Australian role, because at that particular point it wasn't guaranteed.
For Oscar and Lucinda.
Yeah. And Fox Studios were starting in Australia, and so they got me cheap, and I got a 3-picture deal. Is that right? My agent's here tonight.
So yeah, just Oscar and Lucinda, 97, Elizabeth, 98, and all of a sudden, first Oscar nomination, and people are saying, oh, who's Cate Blanchett? We better pay attention, right?
I know, it was literally like I didn't even know there was a festival in Venice. I showed up and I didn't have a dress, and someone from Dolce & Gabbana, I think, let me a dress. I have no recollection about what happened that night. Absolutely none. No, I was deer in the headlights, yeah.
And I mean, I imagine it must have been fairly jarring when you're essentially like right in the deep end like that, and then in a good way, but I mean, like right after that it hasn't stopped. I mean, Talented Mr. Ripley was the next year for Anthony Minghella, and others that we're going to obviously come to, but I guess I just wonder, how did you acclimate, first of all, to now, you've always gone back and forth between screen acting and stage acting.
Yeah.
But in those, early years, people must have been saying, strike while the iron's hot, right? You've got a big movie with Elizabeth, you're the star of it, and...
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, after I played Elizabeth I, there was a lot of scripts that came in with characters with the most lines, and they were all basically the same character, just in different costumes. And so I realized very quickly that they were just wanting you to do what you'd done before, but they could just change the costume designer and the cinematographer. And so that's why I was so excited to work with Minghella on this little nugget of a role. That's where I met the wonderful, late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman. He and I both had small roles, and so we spent 3 months together.
And the excitement, though, you're saying, was that it was not a period costume.
Yeah, but it wasn't anything to. It was worlds away from the character I'd played. Or I took a very small role in a film which I think about 2.5 people saw, called Pushing Tin, where I met John Cusack and Billy Bob and Angelina, and I played the wife of a air traffic controller. That was a scary film, working out how the air traffic controlling around the New York area actually works. Didn't fly for a while after that.
Well, let's pause and take a look at Cate as the Virgin Queen in Shekhar Kapur's Elizabeth in 1998, and then also in Anthony Minghella's The Talented Mr. Ripley in 1999. I'm excited to see you in the sequel, The Talented George Santos, which is... So you thought, I guess, after Elizabeth actually was completed, but before it was released and recognized, you weren't so confident that it was going to be well received, or that you were going to be well received. I had read that there was some skepticism.
Well, it was at that time when that sort of there was no such thing as a Bollywood West hybrid. I mean, if any of you have seen RRR, there's a lot of breakout films. And if any of you have been to India, the filmmaking, the way they string narratives together is so entirely different to how we are traditionally used to in the West. And it felt like it was such a strange endeavor. At the beginning of the process, Shekhar Kapur handed me a book with uncut pages from, 1750, basically saying the sayings of Queen Elizabeth I. And so I think he left me to sort of deal with any historical accuracy that the film had. But I just felt like it was an act of hubris that Glenda Jackson and Judi Dench had played Queen Elizabeth. Flora Robson, who was I? A little girl from the colonies. So, but yes, so I think I was quite shocked at that it was so well received in Venice and then here in the States.
So there's that. There's Talented Mr. Ripley, and then there's the first of a number of these hiatuses that you've taken. Is hiatus the plural, or I think so. over the years, where you go back to theater, and I think you did that for a beat there after Mr. Ripley, I believe.
Yeah, but we did a play I did a play on the West End. But yeah, it's never been an either-or situation. I think I've been really fortunate to move between two mediums, because working in a proscenium arch gives you a very strong sense of a frame. And so I found really quite early in my career that I understood better, more deeply, what to do in a wide shot That's why it's always good now that they've got monitors on set all the time, is you just go up and check the frame, and so you think, okay, if I move a bit more to the left, I just innately know it will mean something different, and that's from just having that visceral understanding of the proscenium arch frame. So it's been a really, and then also to understand how to be really intimate with an audience in, in a very big theatre, because you're used to the close-ups, so.
Really interesting, yeah. So you come back from that, and there is this run of The Shipping News, Charlotte Gray, Bandits, and then, of course, the Lord of the Rings trilogy for Peter Jackson. How long were you in New Zealand for that part? And did you realize in the making of it, which I imagine, that this would be something sort of unlike anything we'd seen up to that point?
Someone at that point, I still had an agency in Australia, and someone in the agency in Australia said, "You don't want to go to New Zealand and play an elf." And I said, "It's Peter Jackson." And I said, because now we all go, of course, but at that, he was brain dead and Meet the Feebles and all that stuff. And I was such a huge fan of his, and I said, I absolutely do. So I was there for 21 days. Not enough.
And the rest of them were, what was it, like 9 months or something, right?
No, I think they were there for 2 years.
2 years, because they were back to back.
Yeah, immigration finally had to get them out.
And it was, I guess it was a good enough experience that you wanted to come back for The Hobbit years later, right?
Oh, no, I stalked Peter about the other one. I did say to him that I wanted to play, there was a series where he was going to play a dwarf, and it was behind a table, and I said, well, look, you'll pan past the banquet table, and there'll be you, can I sit there and be your dwarf wife? And so, but I couldn't, it would have taken too long to put the facial hair on, and I was doing something else, so I didn't get to do it. But yeah, it was an incredible family atmosphere, and it was, everyone sort of takes it for granted what a risk it was. The books were so beloved, and I don't think any of us, and I was a small part of it, but I don't think not even Peter and Fran and Philippa could have predicted, Weta couldn't have predicted what an enormous thing it would do, culturally, but for the GDP of New Zealand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Then there's Veronica Guerin, The Missing, and the two films that we'll show clips of next. But just to set it up, first of all, Martin Scorsese's The Aviator. You are playing Katharine Hepburn, and who was still alive at the time you were cast.
No, actually, well, yes, but then when I got on the plane to go and film, I was just waiting in the lounge, and I picked up a paper, and she had passed away that day. I know, it's very considerate of her, right? No, but it was it just felt like some sort of omen. And it's always an incredible responsibility when you, or a daunting prospect. Anna de Armas has it with playing Munro, anyone who takes, that on. And when Michelle did it as well,
yeah.
I think that it's a huge responsibility playing someone who's so iconically known in the medium that you're presenting them. I think that's the challenge.
It's got to be also, was it an immediate yes just because it's Scorsese, or do you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm a blonde Australian being asked to play whatever you would describe her accent as, brunette American,
There are such things as wigs, so that was
okay, all right.
I wasn't worried about that so much.
I would think it's an intimidating assignment, though.
Well, no, but of course, I was doing The Missing, so I was riding out with Marlborough men every day. My first child was learning to walk in the snow outside Santa Fe, and it was one of the happiest times of my life, actually, working with Ron Howard and Tommy Lee Jones. It was I don't think a lot of people saw the film, but it was a really remarkable experience. And then I was told by my agent Hilda that Scorsese wanted to call, and I just had to sit down, and I braced myself, and I knew I was going to say yes to whatever he was going to ask me. I thought he was going to ask me to sort of come to some charity event or something. And he asked me to play Hepburn, and I went, yeah. Of course. But I did. I got the knee sweats. And actually, I did have a bit of a panic attack. Actually, we were living in London at the time, and we were out. I don't know, we were out with our little ones, and all of a sudden, I'd never had a panic attack before. My field of vision went like this, and I just said to my husband, "I've got to go home." And I think it was
Really?
I was so daunted by. But Marty's so great. He got there. And he said, "You don't have to look like her." He said, "You look great blonde. You know, she should have been a blonde." And so, and what he's doing is he's liberating you right there from having to do any sort of looky-likey version. And the great thing he does is that he screens, doesn't just hand you links to, but he screens films. And I was thinking, why is he, I was screening all these screwball comedies, and I realised the very, very first entrance that my character had, he wanted the character's energy to blow Howard Hughes' socks off. So he was asking me to approach the character with the energy that those films had. So he was directing without directing, which is great directing, right?
Absolutely, and Oscar #1. So that was.
It's
great.
all about that.
No, well, I mean, it's exciting. The other one that we'll look at in the next set of clips is Notes on a Scandal, which I imagine sometimes when you take on a role, it's because of the director, like Scorsese. Sometimes maybe is it the people you'll be acting opposite. In this case, Judi Dench.
And Bill Nye.
And Bill Nye, who's going to be
If you haven't seen Living,
yes,
he's incredible, really incredible.
In this case, just to remind folks, you're playing this teacher who has an inappropriate relationship with a student and then has this kind of older teacher who has a bit of an obsession with you, your character, played by Judi Dench. Is there anything that you, when you're with somebody like that who's been around forever and doing great work, do you just observe or do you ask questions? How do you learn from the great people you've worked with?
She is fantastic. She's so wicked. I mean, I remember she wrote. She was telling me David Hare had written a wonderful, wonderful play, and of course, because it was wonderful, wonderful, at that particular point, the London critics decided they didn't like him, so they gave him a bad review, and she did a cross-stitch cushion for him that said "fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck 'em." So that's Judi.
Yeah.
And we were about to do a close-up, and she was standing here doing this with both her hands. And I thought, she lost it? What's she doing? And I said, "Judi, what are you doing?" She said, "Oh, darling." She said, "Takes all the veins away from your hands." And so I'm about to put my hands to my face, and I don't want them to look the age I am. And so...
Valuable lessons.
She's
yes.
really, really great. But also we had our characters, because her character does get very obsessed with my character, as my character gets very obsessed with one of her students. So it's a very unhealthy human soup of a film. Written brilliantly by Patrick Marber, which is how I got into the film in the first place. And we have a sort of a violent episode where Judi was actually looking like a Ninja Turtle. She had to have this back brace on because I had to slam Judi Dench into a dresser full of crockery. And I said to Richard Eyre, the director, I said, I can do a lot of things, but I can't slam Judi Dench into a dresser. And she said, "Don't worry, darling, just go for it." She was fabulous. She was fabulous.
Well, let's take a look at Cate in The Aviator from 2004 and then Notes on a Scandal from 2006.
She'd been really mean to my character. Just so you know.
So after the year of Notes on a Scandal, that's 2006, you have just an insane 2007. There's the sequel to Elizabeth the Golden Age, or excuse me, Elizabeth the Golden Age, sequel to Elizabeth, which, let's start there because I believe that Shekhar and Jeffrey Rush, from what I've read, were gung-ho to do it. You were a little less sold at the outset. Why was that? To go back to a character, I guess, for the first time on screen.
Yeah, I felt I wanted to make sure that we were doing something different. We weren't just trying to replicate the other one. Which, yeah.
Sorry, no, yeah. And he wants to do a third, right? Shekhar.
Shekhar.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he told me about this really interesting, well, who knows if they're facts or not, that Queen Elizabeth was, before she died, was standing in front of a window for 16 hours. And no one knew what she was looking at, and then she eventually lay down on bed. He's interested in those 16 hours.
Wow.
It's a very long film, very still, very, very still.
Right.
It's all, yes, fascinating. A lot of voiceover.
So.
Box office gold.
Yeah, right. You go from that, and I think, if I remember what you had said once before, that ends on a Friday, and on Monday, you're playing Bob Dylan, so in I'm Not There for Todd Haynes, right?
Yeah, no, it was a really strange experience. I was playing Elizabeth I, and every lunchtime I got all of the outtakes from the Penny Baker documentary of Dylan giving press conferences all around Europe on his electric tour, and I would watch them in my corset and my wig, like inches from the television, and I had to lose an incredible amount of weight to play Dylan, so I was getting thinner and thinner and thinner. If you watch the film, you might actually see it. And we finished on the Friday, and then I had to pack up the kids and go to Montreal and land on Sunday evening and start shooting on Monday. That was, yeah.
And there were
younger.
A bunch of people, if people need a reminder about I'm Not There, it's just different versions, interpretations of Dylan throughout his life. In your case, I think it's right when he's going electric, basically that controversial time around then. And it's kind of eerie how much you're made to look like him in there, right? I mean... Yeah,
well, I play him in that really iconic time. I think that a lot of people think about Dylan. But there's various different people, Richard Gere, the wonderful Heath Ledger, and, you know, we all play different versions of him, Christian Bale. And so it's... Yeah, I think, in a way, I think I was never more liberated because I got to... I think if a man had played that role, it would have been much more difficult, whereas I could just absolutely launch myself into it because I was never going to look like him.
Although, yeah, no, it came out pretty...
It's so much fun. It was so much fun.
So those two were 2007, and then 2008, David Fincher, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, as Daisy, this woman in love with a backwards aging man. David Fincher is known for doing a gazillion takes. In this case, I imagine you're surrounded by, or people with dots on their face or whatever, with all the visual effects that were required to do this. How do you, I've heard people that say they absolutely hate the idea of, like, what do you want, I'm not clear what you want me to do differently with take 32 versus 31, or, you know, you can drive you nuts. Other people say they love it. It's figuring it out. Where did you land on that question? Well,
I don't have a particular process. I think that comes into being depending on who you're working with and what you're working on. And I was in Whole Foods and I bumped into an actor who had worked with David Fincher, and he saw me and he said, "Are you about to work with David?" And I said, "Yeah," and he just burst into tears. And I went, "Oh, you poor thing." And thinking, no, but I loved it. I really loved it. And I love working with Brad. And the character and the Eric Roth's screenplay was so beautiful. It was really beautiful, but it was quite an interesting time because we were one of the first films to go back into after Hurricane Katrina. So it was very challenging. You know, the first Mardi Gras was back on, so it was a real privilege to be in New Orleans at that time.
And you mentioned working with Brad Pitt. I had neglected to note 2 years earlier you guys had done Babel together. It was a smaller part, but it was the whole catalyst for how one thing can ricochet and have effects all over the world. Just anything you might want to say about that one? That was
yeah. I mean, once again, I mean that's another experience of I wanted to work with Inaritu, and I knew Brad was potentially doing it, so the three of us talked about it. And it's a really small role, but it sets up the rest of the drama, which sort of cascades from this particular event. And so it wasn't the size of the role that drew me. It was just being part of that, the vision of that film.
Totally. So this is where I think the most marked hiatus came after Benjamin Button, right? There's like 5 years when you're not on the big screen, with the exception of the Hobbit 8 days or whatever you said it was. You were not just sleeping in. You were very busy during those years. Can you talk about what you and your husband were up to, and how that may have enabled you to do the thing that brought you back, which was, I believe, Blue Jasmine?
Oh, yeah. Well, we had our third child, and so that's a big one. And then we were asked to go back and run the Sydney Theatre Company, which is the largest of the state theatre companies. And it was where I got my first job. My very first job at a drama school was understudying another actress for a production of Carol Churchill's Top Girls. And so to go back and run the company with my husband, who's actually offered the job, and he said, why don't we do it together, was some of the most, it was a life-changing decision. So we were feeling pulled back to Australia, which is a very magnetic country anyway. And one of the first things we programmed, the very first year, we programmed a play which Steven Soderbergh directed based on the Casey Anthony story, which he called Top Mum. And then Liv Ullmann came to direct a production of Streetcar.
With you as Blanche.
Yeah.
And there is some connective tissue maybe between Blanche and Jasmine, who has a breakdown of her own in Blue Jasmine, which was the one that you came back for. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I had thought when I received the script that Woody Allen, who directed the film, must have seen it, but he never goes to see anything. And so, no, he hadn't, apparently. And he wouldn't talk about Streetcar at all, even though the parallels to me were very obvious. But what was so great, because we were going to take the play to Broadway, but, you can't say, because it was such a success. We had such a wonderful tour. But, my hair was falling out. I was exhausted. I had 3 children. We had a day job and a big responsibility in Australia, so we couldn't do it. So to be able to revisit an echo of that role that was sort of so viscerally inside me was really exciting.
And I would imagine, does it bother you at all that when you do great work on the stage, it's, for a relatively small number of people, they are lucky enough to see it, but then it's sort of gone right here, but you do it on screen, it's there forever. Is there something does that faze you at all, that, at least to preserve, I know it's not the same thing as Streetcar, but I don't know, it must be.
I don't think a lot about legacy. I think, those of you who have seen or might see Tar, the character's very obsessed with legacy. And I think it's a way of sidestepping the experience of living your life. And so I don't think about those things. I really, I love, part of what, I love about the theatre, what I centrally love about the theatre, is the very direct relationship that you have with an audience, and the way that audience absolutely impacts on the way the evening will unfold. Of course, the architecture's the same, but the mood, the atmosphere, the texture of a moment changes because of all of you people in the seats. It's not a passive experience. And so it is my first love, for sure.
Just because I suspect this may be in the clip that we're going to see from Blue Jasmine, can I ask you to just talk about, the breakdown of this character had to be really, I think, calibrated. It's a tricky, I'm not an actor, I would imagine from looking at it, not an easy thing to do. How did you approach that in particular?
Yeah, well, it was a while ago. I'm not sure which piece you're going to play, but but she's somebody who's just holding on in a way that living in a deluded state becomes the safest place to be, because the present and the past are so absolutely painful. And you realize that it's when you've had something, when you lose it, you've experienced this massive void, and she hasn't got enough self-reserve to fill that void.
And this was, I think, not long after the whole Madoff situation came to light. And
yes,
right, there were some people that thought maybe there's a little bit of Ruth Madoff in this character. I don't know.
I think, yeah, clearly. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about a story, is the time in which it's released and the time in which you're making it. We found that when we're doing a television series called Mrs. America,
Yes.
is that, you know, while we were doing that, when we were pitching it to the studio, there was an episode that was about one of the characters was going to have a termination. And the studio was saying, that's past, that moment's past, it's not really relevant to women now. And then the fetal heartbeat ruling came in, and you realise that all of these things were starting to be eroded. So it really does, even though it's set back in time, it absolutely influences the texture of how you play something. So yes, that story did loom large for us, yeah.
Let's take a look at Cate as both Bob Dylan in I'm Not There, and then also as Jasmine in Blue Jasmine. Oscar number 2. I know it doesn't matter to you. I know.
No, not that it doesn't matter at all, but you don't, you know, all you can see are the pitfalls into which you can fall as an actor, you know. And then you try and find an audience. That's the next hurdle.
Sure. Let's talk about a project that I think you were part of a group of people who were trying to realize for years and years, and for some reason, I guess it was not clicking until 2015, when we got to see you in the adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's 1952 novel, The Price of Salt, which was called Carol. And many people regard that film as one of their favorites of your work, and just it's a tremendous performance for people who need a reminder. This woman who has a forbidden love affair with a younger woman, in that case played by Rooney Mara. Why was it so hard to to bring it to the screen, and why was it important to you to stick with it through that struggle?
Yeah, well, those of us who were producing it, it was on again, off again, on again, off again, and I think it's in the landscape we are now, when different types of relationships between different types of people have entered the mainstream. It wasn't like that back in 2015. I mean, that is recent history, and I don't think, I just couldn't see why it was so difficult. It had Todd Haynes directing it, it was Rooney, it was me, and we were producing it with Liz Carlson and Stephen Woolley, and we thought, well, this is going to happen. And of course, the budget got lower and lower and lower and lower, but you know, and so we just thought, we'll just make it, and we'll make it work. But even so, I don't think any of us could have realised the reception that it would have, or how lasting the impact would have been. Obviously, in the same way that the novel did, it was a positive ending to a same-sex relationship. Although I was doing an interview the other day about Tar, and the interviewer, male, said, "You seem to be forging a line in predatory lesbians." I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Lydia Tarr." He said, "Carol." And I went, "Have you seen the film? Have you read the book?" I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, that's a tough one,
you know, it's such a reductive way to look at that story and that beautiful, beautiful film.
The way it ends is kind of haunting, and I wonder, absolutely, yeah. Would you mind reminding folks just that final closing bit about the film and what you interpret it to mean? I think people really wonder about these characters. They felt very sort of invested in them.
Well, it's a lesson in ambiguity. I mean, Phyllis Nage, who wrote the screenplay, really beautiful screenplay. It has this open, which I don't want to spoil for those of you who haven't seen the film, who might see it, where Rooney's character, Therese, returns to try and find Carol, but they just see one another across a crowded room. And it has to be, we knew it had to be incredibly full of possibility. And I think there had been a scene after that which was more descriptive about what would happen next. But I think it meant that it meant that the road wasn't going to be easy, but it was open. There was but it was an acting lesson in ambiguity.
That's great. And second time with Todd Haynes, and I guess I should ask you because, I mean, here's a guy who has, from the ones you've made with him, Far From Heaven, we could go on and on about, he seems to, I don't want to say draw out of actresses because they're the ones that are at least equal partners in it, but like, what is it about the way he works with actresses where so often they do such great work for him?
He comes with these incredible mood boards and sort of almost like a soundtrack for your character, so you get into the mood of how he might shoot you. And so he's very generous with including you into that world. So he was interested in the photography of Soul Lighter, and my brain's gone, but there's a wonderful female photographer who was actually a babysitter, and I think there was a Vivian Meyer, I think it's her name, yeah, and she would photograph. There were sort of strange self-portraits where she'd photograph herself in shop windows, and you'd catch part of her in a mirror or something. But and so you were really invited into the texture and how you were going to be looked at, which is useful because then you can absorb that and forget about it and just play the scenes. But he's a really wonderful. And he's also, in a way, it still feels as kind of fluid as a student film. You know, I'd seen years ago, I'd seen his student film when he was at NYU called Superstar, which was the Karen Carpenter story done with Barbie dolls.
Underground, right?
Unbelievable. Watching this Barbie doll with her mother yelling at her, vomiting into the toilet. It was heartbreaking. It was really, only he could have done that. It was really incredible.
Speaking of student film, like I think going back to wherever it was, NYU, I forget where, but he and Christine Vachon since then through now.
Yeah, he has long relationships.
Yeah. Also, the year of Carol was Truth, you and Robert Redford. He's Dan Rather, you're his producer. There was Cinderella, there was Knight of Cups, and then there was a movie or a project, I don't know how you describe this, that not many of us got to see unless you are, I guess, at certain museums or very select places, called Manifesto, which is a multi-screen film installation written, produced, and directed by Julian Roosevelt, shot in 12 days, in which you play 13 different characters, roles. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's going to be one of the clips we see in a moment.
Oh, yeah. I actually went to Sundance in a linear form. But we did it as a multi-channel work. It showed at the Armory in New York, and I think it was here at LACMA as well. But it was so there were 13 different screens, and each character was saying as a monologue an artist manifesto. And of course, artist manifestos, you know, whether it's the the futurists or the Dadaists or the the surrealists or whoever, they assert their difference. In such a passionate way, and how they want to destroy the artistic movement that has come before them. But the fascinating thing is when you heard all of these done in concert, and then they hit this pitch tone, each of the characters would turn and start speaking on a pitch tone, and they'd all hit this pitch tone. All of these assertions of individuality all sounded exactly the same, which was a really fascinating thing to be in the middle of.
So let's take a look at Cate and Todd Haynes' Carol 2015 and Julian Roosevelt's Manifesto 2015.
That studio was where Bowie recorded.
Oh, really?
Yeah. was really cool.
Very, very cool. How do they have
It
they
was
distribute it? Is that is there a way to watch? I guess will they do a revival or something? How does somebody go back and recreate?
I think it probably, I don't know. You can't YouTube. I mean, I don't know where these things live.
Yeah.
I can find out. But it went to Sundance, so I don't know whether those things then exist on the Sundance channel.
Oh, that could be, yeah. Over the years, immediately after that, there's the all-female Ocean's 8. There's Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And then for the first time, which you brought up earlier, and I'm glad because we definitely need to talk about it, Phyllis Schlafly, this housewife who becomes the face of, anti-feminism, right, basically.
And who would be so happy right now of what's going on in Florida.
Yeah. Opponent of the Equal Rights Act. This is Davi Waller's FX on Hulu limited series, Mrs. America. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to see it. Kate gave 6 months of her life, right, to doing this, and it's pretty amazing. And I guess I just wondered, before we even talk about that character and that story, which again is one of these where eerily, timely, just the way it worked out, but to go to television for the first time since you had become a movie star, was that because film had gotten less appealing, TV had gotten more appealing, both, neither? What was, because TV definitely, I mean, when you first emerged on the scene, it would have been a step in the wrong direction to be going to do TV. Now it's what the cool kids do. So I guess I just wonder what led you to finally do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have such eclectic taste. I mean, I always have. I have as an audience member, and I always am interested in talking to different audiences. And it felt that there was so much story, which is not always a reason to tell it all. Like, just because you're trying to adapt a very fat novel doesn't mean you need to make a very fat movie or a very fat television series. Sometimes it's page 37 that is the impetus, and therefore that's. But this felt like there were a lot of perspectives that needed to be seen. So it felt that the form for that to be seen should be television. And like our production company, Dirty Films, that we did a show called Stateless, and it was about a particular case of a German-Australian woman who ended up on onshore detention because she'd lost her passport. And so we wanted to talk about offshore detention, but reverse engineer it. And we thought, if we make it as a movie, a very small amount of people will see it. Whereas if we make it for ABC television and then stream it through Netflix, a lot more people will see that story. So you work out maybe the best way to communicate with your audience, best way to make it as well.
When you're playing somebody whose views are, I believe it's correct to say, quite different than your own, is that harder than playing somebody in the opposite situation, or is that fun? Like, what did you feel about portraying Phyllis Schlafly?
Yes, I find it really tragic that it's not just in this country, but all over the world, that women are being divided from each other along political lines that are often drawn generationally by men. And I find that I wanted to find a way to somehow, not that one television series can do it, I'm in no way saying that it can, but in a very, in our small way, to try and reach across that divide, to find the points of connection. And so the main thing for me was that, and I suppose the dangerous thing, is to try and allow those characters all of them to be seen, warts and all, to find the points of, because, there's certain things that, human rights abuses are bad. We know that. But why do they keep happening? That's what we need to lean into. And so we need to understand the perpetrators of those abuses. Why do they do what they do? What were their childhoods like? How can we better understand them so we can prevent them in the future? Not that also don't see that the television, film, works of literature are educative tools. I think that's what a broad education is for. They're works of inspiration and a point where people will start to ask interesting questions. But it's tricky because you read some of her writing and you think, did you just say that? Because that actually doesn't make any sense.
Right. We are going to also, I want to make sure that we talk about the films that you did 2 years ago, because this was quite a contrast. Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley, a film noir in which you're basically a femme fatale, which I guess in a sense, yeah, I mean, it's great. And also, I guess you had years earlier done maybe sort of a version of that with The Good German for Soderbergh, just a period, sort of, I don't know if you,
yeah.
but just that part, first of all, because it felt like a lot of people remarked upon, it's like you could have fit in that era when those were actually popularly being made, film noirs. And I guess just that challenge in the same year in which you then play, this is my words, not yours, but it seemed to me a variation of Mika Brzezinski in Don't Look Up, Adam McKay's very dark comedy about, basically a lot of stuff, including our lack of action with climate change, with global warming and all of that. So anyway, just to have those two in 1 year, very, very different kinds of movies, very different kinds of parts.
Yeah, well, Nightmare Alley was done, my part was done right before the pandemic started. And then the movie kept being stopped, obviously. So they finally got to finish it. So it probably would have come out earlier. But Don't Look Up was done right in the middle of the pandemic, which was really strange. I have a small but delicious little role in it. And so that was one where, if you have a wig, bring your wig. If you've got some costumes, bring your costumes. Because there was no movement of any goods or services at that particular point. And everyone was masked up. I mean, we were John Travolta in The Boy in the Bubble. And it really wasn't conducive to, no one left the hotel room. It was a really particular experience. But that's not alone. Everyone was experiencing that. But it was deep in the pandemic.
Prior to Tar, it had been 16 years since we'd last seen a film from Todd Field, who had made the wonderful In the Bedroom,
Yes.
and then Little Children. I wonder if you can talk about just the impression those films made on you earlier in the 21st century, and then how you became aware of the fact that he wanted to come back to feature films with this project Tar, which I believe he said to me, I remember, that I don't think this was going anywhere unless you were going to be part of it. So that's quite a compliment / pressure on you, and all of a lot of people were itching to see another Todd Field film. So tell us about that.
Well, we met probably about 10, 12 years ago now. He was working with Joan Didion on a project, and for one reason or another that didn't happen, but the conversation that we had with one another was so engaged, and obviously I'd seen his films, and they're so deeply human that he just sort of, you could tell he was placing all of the actors and everyone just into a state of cohesive being. He creates an atmosphere and a world that you utterly fall into, and then he pulls the rug out from under you. But you never feel tricked by him, you just feel incredibly disconcerted by his filmmaking. And so obviously I wanted to work with him. And he's such an experimenter as a filmmaker, in that intervening time. He's been continually experimenting with form and the way he uses cameras and the types of stories that he wants to tell. So it felt, when he came back with Tar, that he was just coming all guns blazing. And for me, it was an utterly once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I was saying to him the other day, it is very bittersweet in a way, because it's been such an incredible experience making the film, and then watching the impact that it's had on audiences who've seen it many times, not once but twice or three times. I was working with Alfonso Cuarón in London last year, and he'd seen Tar, and he said I've seen it 3 times. He said I saw it once and I just was blown away. He said the second time I was envious, and the third time I went, how the fuck did he do that?
All right, that's true. It's very haunting. A lot of people go back to it and pick up, such subtle things that are in there, like certain sounds even that have been inserted that that mean something more when you have the context of having seen it once before. Just all kinds of stuff. But I wonder for you, what did you see as your job with this character? What are you trying to communicate in playing this woman who she goes through the spectrum of experiences, emotions? I can't imagine, you're in every scene. I can't imagine you've ever bitten off as much of an assignment as this would have been for you.
Well, sometimes a role, very rarely, hits you at a time when you're open to the sort of the subterranean aspects of what the film is dealing with. I mean, there was so much to do. Just to get to first base, to be able to play the character so that the audience would believe that, she had the unassailable right to be there, that she was a master of her craft. And that involved the prosaic things like, piano playing in German and conducting and, stick technique and, having a musical knowledge. And
you learned German for the part.
Yeah, it just didn't seem authentic that she would be working at the head of a German orchestra, the intendant, the principal conductor, for 7 years, and then rehearse in English. It just didn't feel right. So. And
learn to actually properly conduct. I mean, there were musicians who said, I guess who worked on this, who said they would have worked for you in a real world situation. Like, that's pretty unbelievable.
But I think maybe what I knew, I was absolutely terrified because we had to do all the music stuff up front. And I had a pair of jeans, a friend of mine who was helping me over Zoom with my stick technique, not my dick technique. Someone else was helping with that, sorry. Oh, no, well, anywho. And she just said, just remember to plant yourself on the podium. Do not apologize for being there. And she said, well, work from your core. And I thought, that's exactly what I do on the stage. So I wore a pair of jeans, which sucked I call my Tar jeans. And I just went up there, and in my bad German, I thanked them for their patience. And I said, we have to rehearse together and we'll find our way together, and thank you very much. And then gave the downbeat. We started.
Wow. I wonder, we talked earlier about the fact that you and your husband had run this theater company in Sydney, a major place. Did that in any way inform some of the stuff that Lydia Tarr is dealing with as the person who's running a big artistic organization herself? Forget about the Me Too side of things that comes in, but just the power dynamics and the challenges that somebody at the top faces, where you got to keep a lot of people happy, the donors, collaborators, all of that. I mean, I just wonder if that was relevant experience.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 250 people, between all the people who work in workshop and administration and, and building maintenance, and then you have the creative, the casts and crews who come through, and then you have, responsibility to your sponsors and to your board. And we were CEOs and artistic directors of the company, so responsible for the fiscal health of the company. I realized how lonely that can be, frankly, that the buck does stop with you, and that there will be people who come into your office who you cannot say yes to, and that ones that you want to say yes to, but you can't because either you know they're not quite ready, or you just don't have the money to realise their vision, or you might be able to program it next year, or you've already programmed something else, and so you're always disappointing people. And the hard thing is, in that situation, is because often people will get incredibly angry about that stuff, and so how do you manage those expectations, and how do you manage it respectfully? And the interesting thing, which I innately know being in the rehearsal room, is that sometimes rehearsal rooms can be, in order to move through something together, they can be robust places. And so how do you have that sort of robust and often brutal conversation where you need to kill your darlings, but do it respectfully? So they're things that I sort of very deeply understood.
The way this movie opens is very unusual. We have
It's a Todd Field film.
Todd Field, right? Credits. And then this amazing situation, not unlike the one...
Credits rolling backwards, because of course it's all about time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have you in a situation like this, being, as Lydia Tarr, being interviewed to communicate overtly just what an accomplished and well-known person this is, an EGOT, and they're comparing her to the inside reference to Hildur, who is actually the composer of the film, and all of the stuff there, but a lot of subtext as well. And this is a long conversation there where a lot is communicated with you and Adam Gopnik from The New Yorker playing himself. Just, can you shed any light on, I feel like that must have been a very complex assignment beyond the fact that it's just a lot of dialogue, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk that, in a way, it's incredibly rhythmic, and you realise that you don't need to understand it. There's something disconcerting about it. And I think as the film goes on, you realise that she is one of the world's great classical music performers, but in a way, her greatest performance is herself. And so it was important for me, I think, in a way, in these situations, we try and be as natural as possible. But, there still is an element of performance, because if you and I were talking, just the two of us, I wouldn't continue to be doing that, knowing that those people over there are going to get photographs of me going, there is an element of self-consciousness to it. And I think certainly there is for maestros, because their behaviour is often absolutely cements their reputation and an orchestra's expectation about how they might deal with that particular conductor. So it was a fascinating, we didn't do that scene till sort of halfway through, which I was very grateful for. So we kept refining what it was that she was going to say. But it sets up a lot of the tropes. And also you realise, because someone else's, her assistant, is mouthing her backstory, you soon realise that she's been running from herself and running from her past, and not in the ways that you think she has. It's a sort of an existential running. And that, sort of chasing her shadow in a way, and manufacturing her identity in order to give herself the space and the access to be able to play the great music which she is, a master of.
There have been a few real-world conductors, very famous conductors, who have, in the last few years, been accused of very bad behavior. As
they have of CEOs of major banking corporations.
Yeah, sure.
It's not, this is the thing, is it could have been set in an architecture firm, or, somewhere on Wall Street, or, in Google or wherever. But perhaps that would have been a little more dry and less interesting.
But most of them, though, have been men. The idea of having basically subverting that, having a woman in a way in a world that outside of Tar is still extremely male dominated. I don't think there is to this day a female conductor running one of the, however you classify that, top echelon of of orchestras, right?
No, I mean, it is a fairy tale still. The wonderful Simone Young, my fellow country woman, she was the intendant of the Hamburg Opera and the State Opera and the orchestra there, but no, say for example the Berlin Philharmonic, there's never been a woman. So it's a fairy tale of sorts, absolutely.
But this idea then of the woman being the one who's accused of essentially being a quote unquote, or what we come to see as like the bad man, is there something that you and or Todd would like that to provoke in terms of the audience to think about things? Is it make it easier maybe for men to reflect on things when it's not? I guess I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, is there a strategy to the idea of making people think about things differently by?
Well, the film was about so many things.
Right.
I mean, I thought a lot about her turning 50, her summiting her career, and as an artist, realizing that once you reach a peak, the only way creatively is you can't stay up there forever. If you're going to keep evolving as an artist, you have to have failure. And so, she self-immolates in a profound way, in a way, starts again, but, with a different access point to the music, itself. But yes, I think, if that had been a man atop the podium, I think that's something we would have understood, that we see day in, day out. And we would have had a particular relationship, perhaps a safer relationship to the examination of power that is one element of the film, for sure. Yeah, but it wasn't. The fascinating thing about the responses that the film has had, that exceeded our wildest dreams, was that people have been talking about it. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to view the film, and I think that, as you say, when you go back in and see it the second or third time, you pick up other different elements.
Totally. Well, I'm not gonna. I could go on about it forever, because as you say, there are so many things that it raises. But let's instead bring out in a moment a 6-time Oscar nominee, 3 times this year for producing, directing, and writing Tar. He is now. I should say that Tar is now one of only 4 films that have been recognized as the best film of the year by the New York, LA, London, those film critics groups, and the National Society of Film Critics. The other 3 ever, Schindler's List, LA Confidential, and The Social Network. Please welcome Todd Field.
Hi there. Wow. I've really enjoyed this talk a lot.
You had a little sleep, didn't you?
Yeah, good to see you. Wow. I have some prepared remarks tonight. This is it's kind of an incredible moment to be able to be in conversation with Cate, as it's always incredible to be in conversation with her. We met about, roughly 12 years ago. And when you sit with Cate and you're in dialogue with her, it changes you completely, forever. She truly is one of the great minds and hearts that you'll ever come across. And yes, there is a performative, element to this, as you guys are pointing out, the sort of Gopnik interview. But the truth is that who you're seeing up here and who you're hearing up here, that's Cate. While Cate Blanchett is many things, with accomplishments that would make Lydia Tarr pale by comparison, as a practical matter, let's just explore 4 of those things. Cate is an activist, a humanitarian, a working mother, and the best dressed woman in the world. As an activist, she joined former Vice President Al Gore's Climate Project and became the ambassador for the Australian Conservation Foundation, putting her superhuman efforts behind passing a carbon tax, something she received a whole lot of shit for. Particularly from Australia's hard right. Did this dissuade her? No fucking way. She doubled down and she continued the fight, continuing her work with Solar Aid to create sustainable market for photovoltaics, to bring clean renewables to places in Africa with no access to power other than fossil fuels. An urgent and vital benefit to communities that created new possibilities in other sectors, including healthcare and education, to lift up and exalt those who heretofore had no hope for a real future for either they or their families. And as a humanitarian, her work with the United Nations had brought a sense of awareness and action for the desperate need of aid for global refugees fleeing countries for acts of genocide. Cate's taken personal missions to bring attention to the issues faced by the displaced and disparaged people fleeing Syria. We're suffering so far now with these earthquakes that are going on in Myanmar. Her efforts in this aim were recognized at the World Economic Forum, where she addressed the United Nations Security Council about the atrocities committed against the Rohingya people, to this day one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. Now, as an artist, we've heard this discussion tonight, and where does one begin? You guys have spent a good deal of time talking about Cate's real love, which is the stage, and it might, at the time, at the very height of her success as a film actor, for reasons that Cate has explained, she sort of stepped away to run the Sydney Theatre Company with Andrew Epton. They traded off acting and directing duties to build a cultural institution that filled a vacuum and championing First Nations and all manner of new work, commingling with classics of the canon like Chekhov and as Cate has talked about, Williams. Now, that production of A Streetcar Named Desire that was directed by Liv Ullmann traveled from Sydney to BAM and the Kennedy Center. It was a critical and commercial smash. Cate received universal acclaim for her performance as Blanche Dubois. The New York Times critic, Ben Brantley, said, "Miss Ullmann and Miss Blanchett have performed the play as if it had never been staged before, with the result that, as a friend of mine put it, you feel like you're hearing words you thought you knew pronounced correctly for the very first time." John Lahr of The New Yorker wrote, "With her alert mind, her informed heart, and her lithe, patrician silhouette, Blanchett gets it right from the very first beat. I don't expect to see a better performance of this role in my lifetime." And Meryl Streep, upon leaving the theater, said, "That performance was as naked, as raw, and extraordinary, and astonishing, and surprising, and scary as anything I've ever seen. I thought I'd seen that play. I thought I knew all the lines by heart, because I've seen it so many times. But I'd never seen the play until I saw that performance." Now, at this point, Cate had been away from the screen for a very long time indeed, but Hollywood hadn't forgotten. They just kept calling. Finally, she answered. The filmmakers, many of whom have been discussed tonight, who've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to collaborate with her, read like a who's who of the greatest filmmakers of our time. Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, Gillian Armstrong, Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, Peter Jackson, Terrence Malick, Anthony Minghella, Todd Haynes, Jim Jarmusch, Bruce Beresford, Shekhar Kapoor, David Fincher, Steven Soderbergh, Adam McKay, Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro Inarritu, Guillermo del Toro. I'm going to stop there. Just to name but a lucky few. Yes, how lucky they all were. And how lucky I am. And how lucky the world is to live in a time where Cate Blanchett graces our stages and screens and walks the earth for our common good. John Lahr of The New Yorker got it right. Her informed heart. That is Cate Blanchett. And yes, she is one of the greatest actors who's ever lived. What a privilege and joy it is to introduce to you my friend and colleague and the recipient of the Outstanding Performer of the Year Award, the one and only Cate Blanchett.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Todd. Thank you. I won't bang on. You've heard enough and seen enough. But thank you so much, Todd. And it really is lovely to be back in Santa Barbara. You know, which is a place that, that is. It's a community so full of spirit and such a warm, loving, film-loving community. So thank you to the Santa Barbara Film Festival for the third time. Clearly a lot of people have said no. You go, you got me again. Thank you. You know, for Outstanding Performance of the Year, it's an honor in any year. But this year in particular, when there have been so many outstanding, idiosyncratic performances, memorable performances by women of wildly different shapes and sizes and artistic ambition, it's an honor indeed. So thank you so much. And thank you, Roger. And thank you, Scott, for the conversation. Thank you very much. And for the reminder that I have been in this industry for quite some time, which really is a genuine surprise to me that I've been able to pursue what I love. I mean, in a way, acting is a sort of a physical, visceral form of anthropology. You know, you get to sort of excavate a character, a set of relationships, and the circumstances that they live in. You know, it involves dance and theatre and costume, architecture and random snatches of conversation, and they're all channeled into one form, and that is a form that I love so much, which is film. And the last 30 years, my passion in the film industry has been the craft of acting. And this passion has led me to seek out roles that can deepen and challenge that craft. And in doing so, you fail, and you fail, and you fail. And sometimes it works. And that is, you know, you can do all the homework in the world, and the film can succeed, but it fails to reach an audience. And so I often think about what we decide is a successful film, what we decide is a successful performance. Is it one that wins awards like this? Or is it one that stands the test of time and people discover in 10 years' time? It's so sort of personal in a way. And so thank you for that painful... It's a very big way to look at yourself. I mean, you don't... You don't really ever get, your phone just doesn't prepare you for that. So just, yeah. But it also, I think the gift, I'm a wonderful audience member, by the way. I love going to the theatre. I love going to live music and to dance and to the cinema. And just to forget who I am and to, with strangers in the dark, imagine somebody else's ambition. And I think often when we think about what people are trying to do there up on the big screen, it's important to remember, what are they trying to do, rather than, do I like it? Do I dislike it? I mean, these things aren't often useful assessments about what is actually people are trying to do up there. Maybe they're trying to do something to shift us into uncomfortable and different places, and that is certainly what Todd Field did for me and for audiences in Tar. Look, let's be frank, I do like being a little bit terrified, but it's only such roles that ask you to shift and change, and that are as startling and game-changing, and they are only as startling and game-changing as the stories they sit within. And they're determined by the dance partners that you are lucky enough to find yourself paired with. And they are also dependent upon the delicate dance that you find and make with a director. And I know how rare those collaborations are firsthand. And so I accept this honour 100 million trillion % in the name of the most generous, inspiring of collaborators that I have ever had the great good fortune to work with, and that is Todd Field. Because Tar consumed me whole and it spat me out, and I'm not quite sure where I am. But it shifted my sense of what is possible. And I think that's the thing about being terrified. I mean, in a safe environment, of course, but being creatively terrified, creatively confronted. You can go one of two ways. You can get defensive, or you can run towards the opportunity that presents you. And I think if you do that, whether it succeeds or whether it fails, you'll be changed by it. So thank you, Todd, for profoundly changing me in ways that I am yet to understand. And thank you to all those who set sail into the uncharted waters on SS Field. To mention a few, I mean, the cast, of course, and Hilda Gunnarsdottir, a wonderful composer, working with her on working out what Tar's composition was so important to understanding who the character was. To Monica Willi, who's one of the world's great editors, to Florian Hofmeister, our DP, to Marco Bittner-Rossner, who extraordinary production designer. We kept losing locations and he was endlessly inventive. To Bini Diagala, the costume designer who I worked with on Manifesto and Mrs. America, she's wonderful. And to the Dresden Philharmonic Orchestra. I cannot believe that I had the opportunity to make music with those, to play Mahler with them. Oh my God, unbelievable. And thank you to the Santa Barbara Film Festival and to you, audiences, which is why we do this in the first place. Thank you, thank you. Thank you.